Hello, this is Linda Cheek, and welcome to The Real Cause of Drug Abuse. I hope the information you learn here is beneficial enough to you that you pass it on to others. What this country and the world needs to combat the epidemic of drug abuse is true concepts that are logical and demonstrable. The real cause of drug abuse is critical to understand and pass on. The misinformation about what causes drug abuse has made people live with chronic untreated pain. And, as we've seen with the increase in deaths, people would rather be dead than have untreated pain. Doctors, such as myself, have suffered at the hand of law-breaking federal prosecutors with no justification. I hope you learn from this presentation, apply what you learn to your lifestyle, and pass it on to your friends and family. I have two websites which you can learn more from. 7pillarstotalhealth.com is my website about natural healing. DoctorsofCourage.org is a website of information pertaining to the attacks on doctors today that treat pain and have found themselves the target of the United States government through no fault of their own except compassion for their patients. I have several DVDs on various topics currently available on my website or under production. My goal is to teach people how to regain or maintain their health using healing forms of medicine rather than conventional medicine that keeps you sick. So let's get started. What is the real cause of drug abuse and addiction? Well, first, let's talk about what is not the cause. The drugs. Yes, you heard me right. In spite of the propaganda you've been taught, drugs themselves do not cause drug abuse or addiction. To better understand, let's look at history. Well, maybe not as far back as the Garden of Eden. Let's look at the history of opium, the most notorious drug to be blamed for addiction. Opium is obtained from the poppy plant, Papaver somniferum. The seed pods are scored by hand so that the latex leaks out and dries up. It is then scraped off and harvested. In ancient times, it was used for many things ranging from rituals to anesthesia for surgery. It soon became a demanded medical product. Transported for hundreds of years along the Silk Road, eventually extending throughout Europe and into Asia and China. Opium is mentioned in the most important medical texts of the ancient world, including the writings of Avicenna and Dioscorides, the Ebers Papyrus, and Galen. In China, opium was used for recreational purposes. Even still, it took 300 years before they realized that smoking opium on a regular basis for recreational use could lead to physical dependence. Notice they still don't refer to it as addiction. By the early 1900s, 1 in 4 Chinese men smoked opium regularly. Opium came to Western America with the Chinese immigrants working on the railroads and spread from west to east. The regulation of opium began with the stigmatization of these Chinese immigrants. So blaming addiction on opium is actually a racial stigmatization. Now for some brief definitions of terms. The term opiate refers to naturally occurring chemicals in the poppy. Morphine and codeine are therefore correctly called opiates. All of the other derived chemicals are correctly called opioids. Opioids can be semi-synthetic, such as heroin, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, oxycodone and oxymorphone, and naltrexone, or completely synthetic, such as fentanyl, buprenorphine, and methadone. Former opium-containing medicines include laudanum and extraction of opium into brandy. It was introduced into Western medicine in 1527. Laudanum became the basis of many popular patent medicines of the 19th century. Used medicinally and recreationally, it was available at both pharmacies and grocery stores until the early 20th century. The widespread use of opium is demonstrated in a medical text, Wright's Family Medicine was written by Dr. Isaac Wright, a physician in Tennessee, and was written in 1833. Opium is a primary treatment for a variety of disorders from cough to grief to indigestion and many more. The use of opium for medical treatment is still possible today. Paregoric, a common over-the-counter remedy containing opium, was available when I was growing up, and it is still available by prescription. Morphine, the first derivative from opium, was first isolated in 1803, and thus the pharmaceutical industry was born. Morphine sales began in 1827 by Heinrich Emanuel Merck, which led to the Merck Pharmaceutical Company. The great advantage of purified morphine was that a patient could be treated with a known dose. Up to 10 times stronger than opium, morphine quickly spread through the medical community as a miracle drug and was by far the best medication for severe pain relief. It is still the standard today. Codeine was isolated in 1832. Heroin, the first semi-synthetic opioid, was first synthesized in 1874, rediscovered in 1897, and was marketed from 1898 to 1910 as a non-addictive morphine substitute and cough medicine for children. Now, did that make your great-grandparents addicts? I don't think so. Oxycodone, a thebaine derivative similar to codeine, was introduced by Bayer in 1916 and was also promoted as a less addictive analgesic. Now, back in 1869, Dr. George Beard proposed a theory of what he called neurasthenia, which included symptoms of fatigue, anxiety, headache, heart palpitations, high blood pressure, neuralgia, and depressed mood that could predispose an individual to addiction. He attributed this to the stresses of modern civilization and urbanization, and his explanation of addiction is closer than you might think. So what is addiction? Heroin addiction is considered to be one of the hardest addictions to recover from, and actually, without the changes occurring in the body that I am going to teach you, the addiction can never be recovered from. Once an addict, always an addict. But that is because current treatment does not address the cause. So if the drugs aren't the cause of addiction, what is? The cause of addiction is toxicity. Have you ever heard of toxicity in the body? Not from your doctor, I'm sure. It's not taught in medical school, but it is the main cause of disease today. The principle of toxicity is this: what goes into the body must come out. Your body is like an aquarium. It is an ecosystem filled with organisms, parts, tissues, etc. When everything is working correctly, it stays clean and healthy. But let's say the filtration system goes on the fritz. What happens to the aquarium? You're right if you say that everything dies and the aquarium becomes a glob of decaying sludge. The only point conventional medicine has right about addiction is that addiction is a disease. But conventional medicine is clueless as to what causes disease. I hope to change that. What you learn here about curing addiction can be applied to any chronic disease. Addiction is caused by 3 things: toxicity, stress, and despair. First, let's look at toxicity. Disease, including addiction, is the result of an unhealthy environment inside the body, just like the aquarium gone bad. So disease, including addiction, is a lifestyle disorder. Addiction becomes a problem with industrialization, just like Beard recognized. With industrialization came pharmaceuticals, the end of natural living and natural medicine, and putting more toxins into the body. Major historical factors in the development of chronic disease as well as addiction include the following: anti-inflammatories, The inflammatory process is necessary for healing. Stop it and you stop healing, which creates chronic pain and chronic disease. Antibiotics create dysbiosis, or the growth of the wrong organisms, because the good bacteria have been killed off, and bad organisms make toxins. Vaccinations. These compromise the immune system. An over-control of fever prevents the natural destruction of toxins and bacteria and viruses. Fast food and processed food increases toxin intake. And high fructose corn syrup and cheap soft drinks increased acidity, which prevents toxin removal. What causes disease and addiction? All disease is characterized by three processes. First, the excretion of toxins is blocked. Second, the deposition of toxins into the cells. And third, the degeneration of the cells and eventually tissues by the toxins. You see, health is like a bridge. Optimal health is the center line. Suboptimal health falls in between the center line and the edge of the bridge. Disease is falling off the bridge. The bungee cord is conventional medicine. But all the bungee cord does is put you back on the edge of the bridge. It can't move you back to the center line. And from the edge, it takes only a slight push to fall off again. So what determines where you are on the bridge? The basis of good health and the prevention of addiction is to prevent toxicity in the body. So how does your body become toxic, creating the propensity for drug addiction? The main thing to understand is that if you prevent toxicity, you prevent addiction. Treat the toxicity and you cure addiction. So where do toxins come from? First, autointoxication, which is poisoning from inside the body. This comes from stress and inadequate nutrition and failure to excrete toxins. Second is heterointoxication, or poisoning from outside the body, which includes pollutions, drugs, and food additives. Now, we all know about toxins we are exposed to environmentally or through our food, but there are three causes of toxicity you are probably not familiar with, and these are dysbiosis, the absence of qi, and autoimmune responses to toxins inside, on, or surrounding the cells. So let's look at each of these and how they cause an increase in drug addiction in American society today. What is dysbiosis? The word dysbiosis translates to wrong life. It is the absence of the proper bacterial flora that supports a healthy body and the presence in the body of the wrong microorganisms. So what causes dysbiosis? The failure to get inoculated with the right organisms, killing off the right organisms, and support of the wrong organisms with a high sugar, processed carb, yeast growing diet. The second cause of disease is loss of qi. Qi is the active principle forming part of any living thing. Qi literally translates as breath, air, or gas, and figuratively as vital energy or life force. The best modern example of loss of qi is the condition called fibromyalgia. The third cause of disease is autoimmune responses to toxins inside, on, or surrounding the cells. This concept is very important for you to understand. Think of the particles inside the cell as belonging to two categories, like the sides of a seesaw, self on one side and non-self on the other. When a healthy baby is born, the cells would contain only self. But as toxins are taken in and stored in cells, more non-self is in the cell. So self is on the left and non-self is on the right of the seesaw. As long as there is more self than non-self, that is, the seesaw is heavier on the self side, the immune system will recognize and remove the non-self. As life continues and the cells become filled with more toxins, eventually the seesaw is balanced even. Then the immune system starts to have a hard time telling the difference between self and non-self. And then finally, when the toxins outnumber the self particles, here versus here, then the seesaw is flipped. The immune system now thinks the cell is foreign and attacks it. And that's an autoimmune reaction. What have we learned so far about the cause of disease and therefore addiction? Toxicity is what causes disease. The body's reaction to the toxins deposited determines the disease, and toxins decrease the body's means of healing the disease. In conventional medicine, toxicity is not even a recognized problem. That is why chronic diseases have not been cured. But there is a science that does explain toxicity and can cure chronic disease and addiction. And that science is homeopathy. I'm not going to explain the science of homeopathy here. I have a complete DVD explaining. But I hope I can give you enough insight into the beauty of this science to understand how you can identify the potential of drug addiction in a person through homeopathic characteristics. The effect of toxicity on the body is explained by homeopathic miasms. Miasms can also be called reaction modes because each miasm has particular reaction capability to experience. So now I'm going to give you a quick look at the 4 homeopathic miasms. The Psoric Miasm, or hyperurgic reaction mode, has lots of reserve energy. These folks work 16 to 20 hours a day. They push themselves and they're very vibrant. This is considered the healthiest miasm. The Sycotic Miasm is hypourgic, meaning low energy. And they hold on to the toxic material because they don't have the energy to get rid of it. They usually are people who need 8 good hours of sleep to rebuild their energy. They're very calm and equilibrated. And they're the kind of people who, if they have something that they resent or hold something, they'll put it in a knapsack on their back and basically carry it with them. They won't release it. The Tuberculinic Miasm is called the anergic reaction mode because they have almost no energy. Most of the toxic material stays in the body. This is an example for chronic fatigue syndrome, for example. The people in the tuberculinic miasm are usually sick still long time after the illness is supposedly gone. They have very little to no energy. And then finally, the Luetic Miasm is considered the dysurgic reaction mode. That means that the energy is unpredictable. When present, energy is still too little, though, to react, so most material stays in the body. This creates ulcerations and sclerosis. Anxiety is the hallmark of this miasm. Also, drug or alcohol abuse. So Luetism is the miasm for addiction. If a person can be identified as being in the Luetic miasm by his or her characteristics, then the propensity for addiction can be predicted. Now, Luetism has some similarities, such as it is usually involving some form of tissue attack. It is lesional. And there is usually ulceration and sclerosis that is usually early in appearance, rapidly evolving, and causing premature destruction of the tissues of the body. We can also identify Luetism by the tissue that's being attacked. There are 5 types of problems that help identify Luetism in a person. Vascular problems, which involve the circulatory system, like heart disease. Attack on support or elastic tissue, bone or nervous system tissue, and attack on mucous membranes or the skin. Now, there are several predispositions to Luetism, but for time purposes, I'll only mention two common ones: having alcohol or drug familial background, and having growth or formation problems. Now, here are the major signs of Luetism. Pay really close attention to these, because you can see the cause of a lot more that is wrong with our society today than just addiction that is caused by toxicity. And the status quo methods of dealing with these problems won't work. They will just get worse. First, let's look at the psychic distortion in a Luetic person. There is instability and impulsivity, shamelessness, perversions, anxiety and manic depression, sleeplessness, worsens at night, a nervous imbalance. In other words, they are usually either precocious or having mental retardation. There are manias and phobias. The person is usually outside the sexual norm, which includes homosexuality and sexual perversions. And they are outside the social norm, which includes the killers. There is oftentimes suicide, and an intolerance to pain and pain at night. For somatic distortions or problems with the body, the physical body, there's usually a dysymmetry. There can be hyperlaxity in the joints, or the body does not grow straight. There can be small, gappy teeth. There's destructive tendencies and ulcerations. Luetics have a desire for alcohol and drugs and a bad relationship with money. In homeopathy, people are identified by remedy-type characteristics. These remedies are used to identify and then treat Luetism. In my DVD, I go through the characteristics of 15 different Luetic types. We don't have time for that here. So if this has piqued your interest in identifying Luetism in possibly yourself, your family, your friends, or just helping me teach, I recommend that you get the complete DVD available on my website, 7pillarstotalhealth.com. But I will show you the characteristic of one Luetic type as an example. This is the classic type. The person is thin, has sunken features, like bags under their eyes. They have the 3 A's: anxiety, asthenia, and agitation. There is alcoholism. There is a lack of internal structure. They are insecure, feel vulnerable. They are irritable, critical, and dissatisfied. They are immature and they resent people. There is a dependence, a need to control, and they are fussy. They're very neat and meticulous, and they need to be recognized. They keep everything. There's fear of poverty, death, and dark. They think they are incurable, and they are preoccupied with death, and they are germophobic. So you can see from this description how specific these descriptions are, how much we can learn from this in identifying and helping people before they become drug addicts or even murderers. Similarities in all the remedy types include anxiety, alcoholism, depression, a history of abuse, fears or phobias, tendency toward violence, and abnormal sexual impulses. So where does drug addiction fit in the Luetic miasm? Drug addiction is in the same category as alcoholism. In Luetism, the person turns to whatever reduces his anxiety, whether that's alcohol, tobacco, legal or illegal drugs. The big question is, can miasms be changed? Yes, when people heal, they can change miasms. The Psoric miasm is the healthiest. Healing can take place. The 7 Steps to Healing, which is available as a DVD on my website, explains how to achieve it. Now, is addiction inherited? What role does genetics play in the development of addiction? First off, there are two areas: familial inheritance, which are the genes you inherit from your ancestors, and environmental or epigenetics, which is a relatively new form that we are just learning about. And this is what experiences you have that you pass on to your children through modification of your genes. First off, familial genetics. There is no gene for addiction identified at the present time. However, we do know that we inherit the propensity for certain things from our ancestors, and this is explained by the homeopathic miasms. Now, epigenetics, like I said, is a new study of genetics, and what we found is that environment is mapped on our genes and passed on to our children. And this explains why the children of addicts are 8 times more likely to become addicts themselves. A person's experiences changes their genes, and then these tendencies get passed on to their children. This is very important for people to understand, especially the youth, that what they experience will change their genes, and their children will desire or need the same thing. So no longer can they say, well, it's just my body, it's not affecting anyone else, because it is affecting all of their potential offspring. Now, so far we've discussed the physical causes of addiction. Now, briefly, we will cover social aspects. The effects of stress on addiction is actually part physical and part social. Physically, stress is the #1 cause of acidity, which prevents the elimination of toxins, leading to Luetism. Stress arises when a person evaluates a situation as personally relevant and perceives that he or she does not have the resources to cope or handle the specific situation. Stress leads to anxiety. When stress becomes overwhelming, it leads to despair. Despair is loss of hope when a person can't see a way out of their situation. Drugs of abuse take the person away from the stress or despair, even though it is only temporary. So despair leads to drugs. Finally, the conclusion. Decriminalization. Because drug use is driven by things outside the person's control, we must decriminalize it. However, this does not mean that it should be accepted as normal behavior. Being a part of the Luetic Miasm, it should be understood that drug addiction is the result of a lesional disease process and should be treated as such. To summarize, opium has been freely used for thousands of years with little addiction. Neither it nor its derivatives are the cause of drug addiction. The homeopathic miasm of Luetism explains the high rate of addiction today. Luetism also explains the increased violence and sex crimes today. Addiction is caused by toxicity, stress, and despair. That is our modern lifestyle. Addiction is a disease that can be cured and prevented. So what do you do now with this ground-shaking discovery? The most important thing is to spread the word so that doctors and chronic pain patients can stop suffering at the hand of ignorant government agencies. But then comes the rest of the story. Drug addiction and abuse can be cured. It can even be done in the person's own home with determination. The answer to how is multifold, but the most important is the 7 steps to healing. The 7 steps to healing is a natural treatment plan found on my website, 7pillarstotalhealth.com. You can learn about the 7 steps to healing at your own convenience through the DVD available on the website. You can also schedule me to talk to groups through webinars or through personal seminars that you can set up with me. You can also get the complete DVD on the real cause of drug abuse, almost 2 hours of explanation, under DVDs on the website. It is very important that this information be spread to everyone you know, especially your legislators, educators, and medical professionals. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope that you have benefited from your experience here. Please note that this is just an introduction into a very important concept totally unknown in Western medicine, but which is the answer we seek to major problems today. As a thank you for attending, and I hope you'll become a subscriber to my YouTube presentations, I am offering a 3-disc package to you at fantastic savings. You will get The Real Cause of Drug Abuse, The 7 Steps to Healing, and Nutrition for Healing for only $87. That is getting 3 valuable DVDs for less than the price of 2. Just go on to the website to the Drug Abuse Combo. When you place your order, use coupon code YouTube. So now, let's get the word out there and save the world from a life of pain or addiction.